Simone, you're nothing but a leech, a failure clinging to our name? Eleanor Caldwell sneered at the family dinner, her words dripping venom as Richard's cold stare pinned Simone to her seat. The gilded dining room pulsed with their scorn, but Simone's silence hit a storm. Her private jet, a silver arrow of defiance, would soon land, shattering their illusions. In Storm Beneath, witness a tale of betrayal, ambition, and a woman's rise from shadow to sovereign. Can Simone turn their contempt into her crown? Stay tuned to find out. If you love this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more gripping stories. The air in the Caldwell dining room hung heavy, thick with the scent of roasted lamb and unspoken disdain. Simone sat at the far end of the mahogany table, her fingers tracing the cool edge of her wine glass, the crystal catching the chandelier's fractured light. Her eyes, dark and unreadable, flicked to the phone hidden in her lap, its screen pulsing with real-time stock charts, red and green lines dancing like a heartbeat. Caldwell Enterprises was bleeding. Vanguard was circling. She knew it before anyone else in the room. "Simone, dear, you're awfully quiet tonight." Eleanor Caldwell's voice sliced through the clink of silverware, her smile sharp as the pearl-handled knife beside her plate. "Not bored, are we? These business matters must seem terribly dull to you." Simone's lips curved, a practiced mask. "Not at all, Eleanor." Her voice was soft, almost too soft, like the whisper of a blade drawn from its sheath. She felt Ethan's hand brush hers under the table, a fleeting apology, his fingers warm but uncertain. His hazel eyes darted toward her, then away, caught in the orbit of his parents' expectations. Richard Caldwell, at the head of the table, barely glanced up from his plate. "Vanguard sniffing around again," he growled, his voice gravelly with years of boardroom battles. "They're spreading rumors, tanking our stock, parasites." His fork stabbed the meat, a punctuation of rage. Simone's thumb scrolled through her phone, unnoticed. Caldwell's stock had dipped 3.2% since noon. Vanguard's was climbing. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but from the thrill of the game. She saw it all, the market's pulse, the whispers of algorithms, the chaos no one else in this gilded cage could hear. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice tentative. "Father, maybe we could reach out to the old investors, shore up confidence." "Confidence?" Richard's laugh was a bark, his eyes glinting with contempt. "You think confidence stops a hostile takeover? We need capital, Ethan, not hand-holding." He leaned back, his chair creaking under his weight, and fixed his gaze on Simone. "You wouldn't understand, Simone. This is a man's game." Her stomach tightened, a coil of heat and ice. She could feel their eyes, Richard's dismissive, Eleanor's patronizing, Ethan's pleading. They saw her silence as emptiness, a void where ambition should be. They didn't know she was Nyx, the shadow moving millions in the dark, the name whispered on trading forums. Her fingers stilled on the phone, the screen now showing a confirmation. 15% of Caldwell acquired. Phase 1 complete. Eleanor's laughter tinkled, brittle as glass. "Oh, Richard, don't be so hard. Simone's charming in her own way. Not everyone needs to understand the market to be useful." Her eyes flicked to Simone's simple black dress. A silent verdict. Not enough. Simone's jaw clenched, the muscle twitching faintly. She wanted to rise, to let the numbers spill from her lips like venom. Stock prices, debt ratios, the exact moment Vanguard overplayed its hand. Instead, she sipped her wine, the Merlot bitter on her tongue. "They think they're playing chess," she thought. "They don't see the board is mine." Ethan's hand tightened around hers, his knuckles whitening. "Mother, that's enough," he said, his voice low but fraying. "Simone doesn't need to prove anything." Eleanor's brow arched, her smile unwavering. "Oh, darling, I'm only teasing. We all know Simone's." Talents lie elsewhere. Keeping the home, perhaps? Her words landed like a slap, the table falling silent except for the soft clatter of a dropped fork. Simone's chest burned, not from the insult but from the weight of her own restraint. She could hear it, the market's rhythm, the tick of opportunity, the roar of a storm they couldn't sense. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, calloused hands weaving resilience into every word at her Lagos market stall. You don't shout to win, child. You move. Simone had moved. She was still moving. Richard pushed his plate away, his face ruddy with irritation. Enough chatter. We need a plan, not excuses. Vanguard's got us by the throat, and we're bleeding cash. If we don't find a white knight by next week, we're done. Simone's eyes flicked to her phone again. A new message blinked. Vanguard debt acquired. Ready for phase 2? Her lips parted, a breath escaping like a secret. She could end this now, could tip the table and watch their world shatter. But not yet. Timing was everything. Ethan leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. I'm sorry, he whispered. They don't mean it. But his words were hollow, a bandage on a wound he couldn't see. She turned to him, her eyes searching his, finding only guilt and blindness. He loved her, she knew, but he saw a fragile wife, not the predator who'd already sunk her teeth into their empire. The room spun on, a carousel of egos and ignorance. Eleanor raised her glass, her voice syrupy, to the Caldwells, unyielding as ever. We'll weather this storm, won't we? The clink of glasses was a hollow cheer, a toast to a legacy crumbling under their feet. Simone's fingers brushed the phone one last time, locking the screen. She lifted her gaze, meeting Eleanor's with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. To weathering storms, she echoed, her voice a velvet blade. The words hung in the air, a promise or a threat. She didn't care which. They'd know soon enough. As the meal ended, the family rose, their voices fading into the clatter of dishes and the hum of their own arrogance. Simone lingered, her silhouette framed against the dining room's gilded walls. Her phone buzzed again, a single word, execute. Her heart thudded, a drumbeat of defiance. They thought they were the storm. They had no idea she was the hurricane. Simone's breath fogged the window of her private library, the glass cool against her fingertips as the city's skyline glittered beyond. Inside, the room was a fortress of shadows and secrets, bookshelves masking screens that flickered with stock tickers, candlestick charts and encrypted chats. Her fingers danced across a keyboard, the soft clack a counterpoint to the pulse in her temples. Caldwell's stock had plummeted another 4.7% today. Vanguard's was still climbing, a predator baring its teeth. But Simone was no prey. She leaned back in her leather chair, the scent of old books mingling with the sterile hum of technology. A message blinked on her screen. Rumor planted. Vanguard over-leveraged. Ready for next move, Nix? Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. They called her Nix, goddess of night, a name born in the dark corners of trading forums where she'd turned whispers into empires. Richard thought he was fighting a war. He didn't see her pulling the strings. Simone? Ethan's voice broke the silence, tentative, from the doorway. She didn't turn, her eyes fixed on a graph spiking red. You've been in here all day. Everything okay? Her shoulders stiffened, a flicker of warmth warring with the ice in her chest. Just reading, she said, her voice a practiced calm. She closed the laptop, the screens fading to black, and swiveled to face him. His tie was loose, his face etched with exhaustion, the kind that came from fighting battles he didn't understand. He stepped closer, his hazel eyes searching hers. I'm sorry about last night. Mother, she was out of line. I should have said more. His fingers twitched, as if reaching for her but afraid to touch. Simone's jaw tightened, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to grab him, shake him, scream that she wasn't the fragile ornament he thought she was. But the words caught in her throat, heavy as lead. "It's fine," she said instead, the lie bitter on her tongue. "You tried." Ethan's brow furrowed, guilt flickering across his face like a storm cloud. "It's not fine. I know you hate these dinners, and Father, he's under pressure. Vanguard's killing us. There's this investor, Nix, buying up Vanguard stock like it's nothing. Crazy, right?" Her heart skipped, a jolt of adrenaline. She tilted her head, her eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Crazy," she echoed, her voice soft but sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. "Sounds like they know what they're doing." Ethan chuckled, a hollow sound. "Yeah, well, whoever they are, they're playing a dangerous game. Father's losing it. Called every investor he knows today. No one's biting." Simone's fingers brushed the edge of her desk, where a toy solar lantern sat, a gift from her grandmother's memory, a reminder of calloused hands and unyielding will. She could hear the market's rhythm, the chaos of panic and greed. Richard thought Vanguard was the enemy. Naive, she thought. Vanguard's just a puppet. The real game is mine. She stood smoothing her sweater and crossed to Ethan. His scent, cedar and worry, filled her lungs. "You look tired," she said, her hand grazing his arm. "You should rest. Tomorrow's a big day." He nodded, but his eyes lingered, searching for something he couldn't name. "You're too good to me, Simone. I don't deserve it." His voice cracked, a confession of his own inadequacy. Her chest ached, a pang of love and frustration. She wanted to tell him about Nix, about the nights spent weaving traps, about the 15% of Caldwell she already owned. But his gaze held her back, soft and blind, seeing a wife to protect, not a warrior to fear. "Go to bed," she said, her smile tight. "I'll be up soon." He hesitated, then leaned in, his lips brushing her forehead. "Love you," he murmured and shuffled out, leaving her alone with the hum of her screens. Simone sank back into her chair, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A new message popped up. Vanguard execs spooked. Selling off assets. Push now? Her pulse raced, a drumbeat of power. She typed, "Push." Within seconds, her network sprang to life. Anonymous traders, hackers, analysts, all pieces in her invisible chess game. She leaked a rumor about Vanguard's debt, watched it ripple through the dark pools of the market. Caldwell's stock wobbled. Vanguard began to crack. Her eyes flicked to a photo on the wall. Her grandmother's market stall in Lagos, vibrant with fabrics and defiance. "You don't shout to win, child. You move." Simone had moved, she was still moving. Every transaction, every whisper was a step toward dismantling the arrogance that had dismissed her. The phone buzzed again, 20% acquired. Phase 2 is in motion. Her breath caught, a thrill of danger and control. She could feel the storm building, its edges sharp and electric. Richard was scrambling, Eleanor was plotting, and Ethan was drowning in guilt. They thought they were players. They didn't see that the board was hers. She leaned forward, her reflection ghosting across the screen, her eyes burning with purpose. The market roared in her ears, a symphony of chaos she conducted. Vanguard was a distraction, a shiny lure for fools. The real prize was Caldwell, and she was carving it out piece by piece. A knock startled her. Ethan again, his silhouette in the doorway. "Simone, you sure you're okay? You look intense." Her heart thudded, caught between worlds. She closed the laptop, her smile a mask. "Just lost in a book," she said, her voice steady but laced with something darker. "Go to sleep, Ethan. I've got this." He nodded, uncertain, and left. The door clicked shut, and Simone's fingers trembled as she reopened the screen. A final message glowed. Vanguard cracking. Caldwell next. Your call, Nix. Her lips parted, a silent vow. The pieces were moving. The storm was here. Simone's heels clicked softly on the marble floor of Caldwell Enterprises' boardroom, each step a measured pulse against the chaos brewing inside her. She sat in the corner, her simple navy dress blending into the shadows of the mahogany-paneled walls. Ethan's hand rested on her knee, a tether that felt more like a chain. Across the table, Richard's face was a mask of fury, his knuckles white around a pen that trembled with every word he spat. 48 hours, he growled. That's all we've got before Vanguard's vultures pick us clean. Eleanor's laugh was sharp, a crystal shard slicing through the tension. Oh, Richard, don't be so dramatic. We'll find a white knight. We always do. Her eyes, cold as the diamonds at her throat, flicked to Simone, then away, dismissing her as easily as one swats a fly. Simone's chest tightened, her breath shallow, but her fingers stayed still, curled around the phone in her lap. The screen glowed faintly. Vanguard debt squeeze initiated, sell-off imminent. She could feel the room's pulse, Richard's desperation, Eleanor's feigned calm, Ethan's silent panic. They were a tableau of a crumbling empire, blind to the predator in their midst. Her eyes traced the grain of the table, her mind racing through numbers. Vanguard's over-leveraged bonds, Caldwell's plummeting shares, her own 20% stake growing like a shadow. They're praying for a savior, she thought, her lips twitching. They don't see me. Father, what about the Singapore fund? Ethan's voice was strained, his tie slightly askew. They've backed us before. I could call Singapore? Richard snapped, his pen slamming against the table. They laughed me off this morning, Ethan. Laughed. We're bleeding and no one's coming to save us. His eyes, bloodshot and wild, darted around the room, landing on Simone for a fleeting second. This isn't a game for spectators. Her pulse spiked, a hot flare in her veins. She wanted to rise, to let the truth spill, how she'd orchestrated Vanguard's panic, how she'd bought their debt at a fraction, how she was Nick's. Instead, she tilted her head, her smile soft and unreadable. I'm just here to support Ethan, she said, her voice a quiet blade. Eleanor's brow arched, a silent poor dear, but Simone's eyes held hers, unflinching, until Eleanor looked away. The lawyer, a wiry man named Grayson, cleared his throat, his fingers fumbling with a stack of papers. There's something else. Rumors are spreading. Vanguard's stock is tanking. Some investor called Nick's, is selling off their assets fast. They've got Vanguard by the throat. Richard's chair creaked as he leaned forward, his face a storm cloud. Nick's again. Who the hell's this ghost? Some hedge fund cowboy playing games with my company. Simone's lips parted, a breath escaping like a secret. Her phone buzzed. Vanguard withdrawing offer. Debt called in. Her heart thudded, a drumbeat of triumph and dread. She could feel Ethan's gaze, heavy with questions he didn't dare ask. His hand on her knee tightened, a silent plea, but she kept her eyes on Grayson, her face a mask of calm curiosity. Maybe Nix is on our side, Ethan said, his voice hopeful but thin. If they're hitting Vanguard, that buys us time, right? Eleanor's laugh was a brittle chime. Time? Oh, darling, we need more than time. We need a miracle. Her eyes slid to Simone, sharp with accusation. If only everyone pulled their weight. Simone's nails dug into her palm, the pain grounding her. She could hear her grandmother's voice. You don't shout, child. You move. She'd moved. She was still moving. Every rumor, every sale, every whispered deal in the dark pools of the market was her handiwork. Vanguard wasn't the enemy. It was her pawn. Grayson's phone rang, shattering the room's tension. He glanced at the screen, his face paling. It's confirmed, he stammered. Vanguard's pulling their offer. Their stock's in freefall. Nick's. They've bought a massive chunk of their debt. They're threatening to liquidate everything. The room erupted. Richard's curse, Eleanor's gasp, the board members' frantic whispers. Ethan's hand slipped from Simone's knee, his eyes wide with shock. "How is this possible?" he muttered, more to himself than her. "Who is this Nix?" Simone's chest burned, her breath catching as the weight of her secret pressed against her ribs. She could stand, could speak, could shatter their world with a single word. But timing was everything, and the board wasn't hers. Yet. Her fingers brushed the phone, locking the screen. Soon, she thought, her eyes flicking to Richard's trembling hands, Eleanor's frozen smile, Ethan's lost gaze. Richard pounded the table, his voice a roar. "Find this Nix! I want their head on a platter!" His rage filled the room, but Simone felt it slide off her, powerless. She was the storm they couldn't see, the tide pulling their empire under. Ethan turned to her, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You okay? You look calm." His eyes searched hers, a flicker of doubt breaking through his guilt. Her smile was a shadow, her voice barely audible. "I'm fine, Ethan, just watching." But her heart raced, a wildfire she could barely contain. The boardroom felt smaller, the walls closing in as their panic fed her resolve. Nix wasn't their savior. Nix was their reckoning. Grayson's phone buzzed again and he froze, his eyes darting to Simone. Her pulse spiked, a warning bell. Not yet, she thought, her fingers tightening around the phone. But the lawyer's voice trembled as he spoke, his words a spark in the dry tinder of the room. "There's more, Nix. They've made a move on us. They're buying Caldwell shares. Fast." The air stilled, a held breath. Richard's face drained of color. Eleanor's diamonds glinted as she clutched her throat, and Ethan's gaze locked on Simone, a question he didn't know he was asking. She met his eyes, her smile a blade's edge, and said nothing. The storm was breaking. Simone's pulse thrummed in her ears, a relentless drumbeat against the boardroom's suffocating silence. The air was thick with shock, Grayson's words still hanging like smoke. "Nix is buying Caldwell shares. Fast." Richard's face was ashen, his hands gripping the table as if it could anchor his crumbling empire. Eleanor's lips parted, her breath shallow, her diamonds catching the fluorescent light like shards of a broken crown. Ethan's gaze burned into Simone, his fingers twitching, caught between confusion and something sharper, doubt. She sat still, her navy dress a quiet rebellion against their chaos, her phone a silent weapon in her lap. "Who the hell is this Nix?" Richard's voice cracked, a raw edge of fear slicing through his bravado. "Some vulture picking at our bones? Grayson, find them!" Grayson's eyes flicked to his phone, his fingers trembling as he scrolled. "It's unprecedented," he stammered. "They've acquired 51% of Caldwell through off-market trades, complex deals, layered through shell companies. They're demanding control. Now." The room imploded. Gasps, curses, a chair scraping as a board member stood, then sat again, helpless. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat, her voice a hiss. 51%? That's impossible. We'd have known." Her eyes darted to Simone, narrow with accusation as if she could somehow be the traitor. Simone's chest tightened, a coil of fire and ice. She could feel their stares, their panic, their blindness. They built their castle on sand, she thought, her grandmother's voice echoing. "You don't shout, child. You move." She'd moved, through dark pools, encrypted chats, sleepless nights, weaving a web no one saw until it was too late. Her fingers brushed the phone, its screen dark but alive with her victory. Control secured. Phase 3 complete. Ethan's voice broke through, low and unsteady. "How could someone do this under our noses? Father, you said we had time." His eyes flicked to Simone, searching, pleading. She met his gaze, her face a mask of calm, but her heart pounded, a storm breaking against her ribs. He didn't know. None of them did. Richard slammed his fist on the table, paper scattering. "This is a coup, a damn ambush. Grayson, who's behind this? I want a name." Simone's lips parted, a breath escaping like a confession held back. She could end it now, could stand and let the truth burn them all. But the timing wasn't right, not until they felt the full weight of their failure. Her eyes flicked to Grayson, who was staring at his phone, his face paling to a sickly gray. "Sir," Grayson said, his voice barely a whisper, "there's a call. They want to speak to the board. Now." He hesitated, his eyes darting to Simone, then away, as if afraid to linger. Her pulse spiked, a warning flare. Not yet, she thought, her fingers tightening around the phone. She pressed a button, a single tap, and Grayson's phone rang, sharp and jarring in the silence. He flinched, answering it with a trembling hand. "Yes?" His eyes widened, his breath catching. "Understood." The room stilled, every gaze on Grayson. He swallowed, his voice shaking. "The new owner, they're here, in this room." A collective gasp ripped through the board, heads swiveling, searching for the traitor. Richard's face twisted, his voice a roar. "What? Who?" Eleanor's hand clutched her pearls, her eyes wild with betrayal. Ethan's breath hitched, his gaze locking on Simone, a question forming in the crease of his brow. Simone stood, slow and deliberate, her movements liquid, precise. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as her presence filled the space. She smoothed her dress, her fingers steady despite the fire in her veins. "The meeting is over," she said, her voice low, even, a blade wrapped in velvet. "The board will be restructured. Positions will be evaluated based on merit, not legacy. Starting with you, Richard. You, Eleanor. And you, Ethan." The silence was deafening, a void swallowing their gasps. Richard's mouth opened, then closed, his face a mask of disbelief. Eleanor's pearls slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Ethan's hand reached for hers, then froze, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Simone," he whispered, his voice breaking, "You're Nix?" She didn't answer, didn't need to. Her smile was enough, a shadow's edge that cut deeper than words. Her phone buzzed, a final confirmation. Board notified, control transferred. She locked the screen, slipping it into her pocket, her movements calm, deliberate, a predator at rest. "You?" Richard's voice was a croak, his hands trembling. "You've been sitting here playing us. My own daughter-in-law." Simone's eyes met his, unflinching. "You built an empire on arrogance, Richard. You thought silence was weakness. You were wrong." Her words were soft, but they landed like blows, each one stripping away his control. Eleanor's laugh was shrill, desperate. "This is absurd. You're a housewife, Simone. You don't belong in this world." But her voice cracked, her confidence crumbling under Simone's steady gaze. Ethan's hand finally found hers, his fingers cold, trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice raw, a plea for something he'd lost long before this moment. Simone's chest ached, a pang of love and betrayal. She wanted to reach for him, to explain the nights spent building Nix, the loneliness of being unseen. But this wasn't the time. "You didn't ask," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of years. The room spun, a carousel of shock and rage. Grayson cleared his throat, his voice trembling. "Ms. Simone, what are your orders?" She turned to him, her eyes burning with purpose. "Prepare the transition. We start tomorrow." She stepped toward the door, her heels clicking like a countdown. The board watched, frozen as she paused, her hand on the handle. "This isn't about revenge," she said, her voice steady, final. "It's about what comes next." She opened the door, the hallway's cool air brushing her skin. Behind her, the boardroom was a storm of whispers and fear, but she didn't look back. Her heart pounded, a wildfire of triumph and sorrow. They'd thought her a shadow. Now they'd see her light. Simone stood at the boardroom's threshold, her hand still on the door handle, the echo of her words. This isn't about revenge, lingering like smoke. The air behind her crackled with the board's stunned silence, their gazes boring into her back. Richard's ragged breaths, Eleanor's stifled gasp, Ethan's unspoken questions, they pressed against her, heavy as a tide. Her pulse thrummed, a steady rhythm beneath the wildfire in her chest. She'd unveiled Nick's, but the weight of her truth was heavier than she'd expected. Simone, wait. Ethan's voice cracked, raw and desperate, pulling her back. She turned, her eyes meeting his, and saw a storm of guilt and awe swirling in his hazel gaze. His hands clenched at his sides as if fighting to hold on to something slipping away. Her, or the world he thought he knew. Richard lurched to his feet, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "This is a betrayal," he roared, his face flushed, veins pulsing at his temples. "You've been scheming under my roof, stealing my company." His words were venom, but they trembled, betraying the fear beneath his rage. Eleanor's pearls lay scattered on the floor, glinting like fallen stars. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice sharp but fraying, her composure unraveling. "You're nothing but a gold digger who got lucky." Simone's jaw tightened, her nails digging into her palms, the pain anchoring her. She wanted to laugh, to let the bitterness spill, but her grandmother's voice whispered, "You don't shout, child. You move." She'd moved through shadows, through markets, through their blindness, and now she stood at the edge of their world, remaking it. "I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice low, steady, a blade cutting through their chaos. "I earned it." Ethan stepped closer, his breath uneven. "Simone, how long?" His voice was a plea, his eyes searching hers for the wife he thought he knew. "How long have you been this?" Her chest ached, a pang of love tangled with betrayal. She wanted to reach for him, to bridge the chasm between them, but his question stung. How long? As if her silence had been a lie, not a shield. "Long enough," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "Long enough to see what you couldn't." The boardroom stirred, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. Grayson, the lawyer, stood frozen, his phone clutched like a lifeline. "Ms. Simone," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and respect, "what are your orders for the transition?" She turned to him, her eyes burning with purpose. "Restructure the board, merit over legacy, start with financials, every contract, every deal audited by tomorrow." Her words were calm, precise, but they landed like thunder, each one stripping away the old guard's power. Richard's face crumpled, his hands trembling as he sank back into his chair. "You can't do this," he muttered, more to himself than her. "This is my legacy." "Your legacy was built on sand," Simone said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. She looked at him, at the man who dismissed her as a shadow, and felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. "You valued names over vision. That ends now." Eleanor's laugh was shrill, desperate. "You think you can run this company, a housewife playing at power?" But her eyes darted to the scattered pearls, her hands shaking, betraying her crumbling facade. Simone's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "I'm not playing," she said, her voice a quiet storm. She turned to Ethan, his face pale, his hands still clenched. "And you, Ethan, you're part of this, but you'll need to prove you belong." His breath hitched, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and something new, respect or maybe dread. "Simone, I didn't know." His voice broke, a confession of his blindness. "I should have seen you." Her heart twisted, a knot of love and frustration. She wanted to tell him it wasn't too late, that he could still be more than his father's shadow. But words wouldn't fix this. Not yet. "Then start now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of a challenge. The room, fell silent, the board members' whispers dying out, their eyes darting between Simone and the Caldwells. The air was electric, charged with the wreckage of their old world. Then a low hum broke the stillness, growing louder, closer, until it was a roar. Papers fluttered off the table, the windows rattling as a helicopter's blades sliced the air outside. Simone's phone buzzed, a single word, ready. She slipped it into her pocket, her movements fluid, deliberate. "That's my ride," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "Anyone who wants to discuss Caldwell's future can meet me on the roof." She stepped toward the door, her heels clicking like a countdown, each step a declaration of her new reign. Richard's voice cracked behind her, "You'll destroy us." But it was weak, a plea lost in the wind of her departure. Eleanor clutched the table, her face pale. "This isn't over, Simone," she hissed, but her voice trembled, her control slipping like sand through her fingers. Ethan took a step forward, his hand reaching for her, then falling. "Simone," he whispered, his voice raw, "what happens now?" She paused, her hand on the door, her eyes meeting his. For a moment she saw the man she'd loved, the man who'd held her hand at dinners, who'd whispered apologies but never questions. "Now," she said, her voice soft but unyielding, "we build something real." She stepped into the hallway, the helicopter's roar drowning out the boardroom's chaos. Her heart pounded, a wildfire of triumph and sorrow. They'd thought her a shadow, a wife to be pitied. Now they'd see her truth, a force that didn't just weather storms, but forge them. The roof awaited, and with it, a new legacy, one she'd write on her own terms. The helicopter's blades sliced through the night, a relentless thrum that drowned out the city's pulse below. Simone sat across from Ethan, the cabin's leather seats cool against her skin, the dim lights casting shadows across his face. His hands gripped his knees, knuckles white, his hazel eyes fixed on her, searching, pleading, lost. The space between them felt vast, a chasm carved by her secrets and his blindness. Her chest ached, a tangle of love and betrayal, but her face remained steady, a mask forged in years of silence. "Simone," Ethan's voice was raw, barely audible over the rotor's roar. "How did this happen? How did you happen?" His words trembled, a mix of awe and hurt, his fingers twitching as if reaching for answers he wasn't sure he wanted. She leaned back, her navy dress catching the faint glow of the cabin's lights. Her phone lay silent in her pocket, its work done for now. Nix's empire secured, Caldwell hers. But Ethan's question cut deeper than the boardroom's shock. She took a breath, the air sharp with the scent of leather and jet fuel. "It started small," she said, her voice low, steady, like recounting a dream. "A few dollars saved. A trade here, a whisper there. I learned the market's rhythm when I was still a girl, watching my grandmother barter in Lagos. She taught me to listen, not shout." Ethan's brow furrowed, his lips parting as if to speak, then closing. His eyes darted to the city lights below, a glittering maze he'd never navigated alone. "But why hide it? From me?" His voice cracked, a plea wrapped in guilt. "I thought I knew you." Her heart twisted, a hot flare of pain. She wanted to reach for him to bridge the gap, but her hands stayed still, folded in her lap. "You saw what you wanted to see," she said, her voice soft but sharp, a blade sheathed in velvet. "A wife who needed protecting, not a woman who could move mountains." He flinched, his shoulders hunching as if struck. I didn't mean to." His voice was barely a whisper, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I love you, Simone. I didn't know how to ask." The words stung, a reminder of every dinner, every glance he'd given her. Tender but blind. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with his, searching for the man beneath the Caldwell name. "I didn't hide to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. I hid because I needed something that was mine. Not your father's, not your mother's, not even yours. Just mine. Ethan's breath hitched, his hands unclenching, reaching for her, but stopping short. Nix, he said, testing the name, his voice a mix of fear and wonder. You're Nix, the ghost who turned the market upside down. How could you do this alone? She smiled, a ghost of a thing, bittersweet. I wasn't alone. I had a network. Traders, analysts, people who saw what I saw. The market's a battlefield, Ethan. I learned to fight in the dark. Her fingers brushed the armrest, grounding her as memories flooded in. Sleepless nights, encrypted chats, the thrill of outsmarting giants like Vanguard. His eyes widened, a dawning respect battling his guilt. You saved us, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. Father's empire, my family. You saved it. Her chest tightened, a knot of love and frustration. I didn't save it for him, she said, her voice firm, cutting through the cabin's hum. I saved it for me, for us, for something real. She reached into her bag, pulling out a slim folder, its edges worn from her touch. This is the restructuring plan, Caldwell's future. I want you to lead it. Not because you're my husband, but because I've watched you. You're better than their shadow. Ethan stared at the folder, his hands trembling as he took it. Me? His voice was a whisper, disbelief and hope warring in his eyes. You think I can do this? Her gaze softened, a flicker of the love she'd buried beneath her armor. I know you can, she said, her voice steady but warm. But you have to want it. Not for your father, not for me, for you. He opened the folder, his fingers brushing the pages, charts, projections, a blueprint for a new Caldwell. His breath caught, his eyes scanning the numbers, the vision. This is incredible, he murmured, then looked up, his gaze raw, exposed. But why me? After everything? Why trust me? Her heart pounded, a wildfire she could barely contain. Because I see you, she said, her voice low, fierce. Even when you didn't see me, prove I'm right, Ethan. Prove you're more than their name. The helicopter banked, the city tilting below, a kaleidoscope of ambition and chaos. Ethan's hands tightened on the folder, his eyes locked on hers, a silent vow forming in the space between them. I will, he said, his voice steady for the first time, a spark of something new, resolve or redemption. Simone leaned back, her breath slowing, the weight of her secret lifting, but leaving a hollow ache. She'd shown him Nix, but the cost was a fracture she couldn't yet name. The city sprawled beneath them, a battlefield she'd conquered, but this, her marriage, her truth, was a new war, one fought with words and trust, not numbers. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Landing in 5, Ms. Simone. She nodded, her eyes never leaving Ethan's. The helicopter's roar faded to a hum, but the storm between them was just beginning. She'd given him a chance, a piece of her world. Now, it was his move. Simone's heels echoed in the empty corridor of Caldwell Enterprises, each step a pulse against the silence of a company in upheaval. The air smelled of polished wood and stale ambition, the ghosts of Richard's reign lingering in the framed awards on the walls. 3 weeks had passed since she'd claimed the boardroom, and the world she'd toppled was still settling into its ruins. Her chest burned, not with triumph, but with a hollow ache. She'd won, but victory tasted like ash. She paused outside Richard's old office, now a modest meeting room stripped of its mahogany grandeur. Through the glass door she saw him, slumped in a chair, his tie loose, his face etched with lines deeper than she remembered. His hands, once commanding boardrooms, clutched a faded photo of the company's first building. Her breath caught, a pang of pity warring with resolve. You don't shout, her grandmother's voice whispered. You move. She pushed the door open, the hinges whispering. Richard's head snapped up, his eyes bloodshot, wary. "Simone," he said, his voice a gravelly shadow of its former boom. "Come to gloat?" Her jaw tightened, her fingers brushing the edge of her tailored blazer. "No," she said, her voice low, steady, like a tide smoothing jagged rocks. "I came to talk." She sat across from him, her posture straight but not rigid, her eyes meeting his without flinching. The room felt smaller, the air heavy with the weight of their shared history. Richard's laugh was bitter, a dry rasp. "Talk? You've taken everything. My company, my legacy. What's left to say?" His fingers tightened around the photo, his knuckles whitening. Simone's chest ached, a knot of sorrow and steel. She wanted to hate him, to let his arrogance fuel her fire, but all she saw was a man broken by his own blindness. "Why?" she asked, echoing his question from weeks ago. "Why did you build something so fragile?" His eyes widened, a flicker of surprise cutting through his anger. "Fragile?" He spat, but his voice wavered. "I built an empire. Decades of work, sacrifice." "You built a name," she cut in, her voice calm but sharp, a blade slicing through his delusion. "You taught Ethan to chase stock prices, not people. You valued legacy over vision. That's why it crumbled." Her words hung between them, heavy, unyielding, each one a mirror to his failures. Richard's face crumpled, his hands trembling as he set the photo down. "You think you're better," he whispered, his voice raw, exposed. "You think you can rewrite my life's work?" Simone leaned forward, her eyes burning with purpose. "I'm not rewriting it," she said, her voice steady but laced with a quiet grief. "I'm saving it. From you." She paused, her fingers brushing a small pendant at her neck. A gift from her grandmother, a reminder of calloused hands and unyielding will. "My mother taught me to build on rock, not sand. That's what I'm doing." His breath hitched, his eyes darting to the pendant, then away, as if it burned. "Your mother," he muttered, his voice thick with disdain, but it cracked, betraying a flicker of doubt. "What does she know about this world?" "Everything," Simone said, her voice soft but fierce. "She taught me to see value where others see nothing. That's why I won." Her heart pounded, a wildfire of pride and pain. She thought of her mother's market stall, the vibrant chaos of Lagos, the lessons woven into every deal. Resilience, not arrogance. The door opened and Ethan stepped in, his face taut with exhaustion but lit with a new resolve. He carried a tablet, its screen glowing with charts, Simone's restructuring plan in motion. "Simone," he said, his voice steady, "the audits are done. We've cut 3 contracts. The board's ready for your review." His eyes flicked to his father, a mix of pity and defiance. Richard's gaze hardened, but he said nothing, his silence louder than any shout. Simone stood smoothing her blazer, her movements deliberate. "Good," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "We move forward tomorrow." She turned to Richard, her eyes softening for a moment. "You can be part of this, Richard, but not as you were." His laugh was a hollow echo. "Part of your empire?" he asked, his voice dripping with bitterness. "Under you?" "No," she said, her voice unyielding. "Under the truth." She stepped toward the door, Ethan falling in beside her, his presence a quiet anchor. Her heart thudded, a storm of hope and sorrow. She'd torn down their world, but she wasn't here to gloat. She was here to build. As they reached the corridor, Ethan's hand brushed hers, his fingers warm, hesitant. "You meant it," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "About saving it, about us." Her eyes met his, searching for the man she'd challenged to rise. "I did," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But it's up to you now, Ethan. Show me you're more than their shadow." He nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes alight with something new, purpose or redemption. "I will," he said, his voice steady, a vow carved in the air between them. Simone's phone buzzed, a message from her network. Clean Tech Fund finalized. The Caldwell merger is ready. Her lips curved, a shadow of a smile. The fund, named for her mother, a beacon of resilience, would redefine Caldwell, a legacy not of gold, but of impact. She glanced back at Richard, a silhouette against the fading light, and felt no triumph, only a quiet resolve. The ashes of their old world were hers to reshape. Simone stood on the penthouse balcony, the city's pulse throbbing below, a tapestry of neon and ambition stretching to the horizon. The night air was crisp, tugging at her silk blouse, her hair catching the wind like a dark banner. Her fingers curled around the railing, cool metal grounding the wildfire in her chest. A year had passed since she'd claimed Caldwell, since Nix had risen from the shadows. The company, now Caldwell Nix, was no longer a relic of arrogance, but a beacon of innovation. Its clean tech ventures lighting up markets and communities. Yet the victory felt incomplete, a hollow note beneath her triumph. Her phone buzzed, Eleanor's name flashing on the screen. Simone's breath caught, a flicker of old wounds. Eleanor's sharp smiles, her dismissive barbs. The message was simple, her voice softer than Simone had ever heard. Will you come to dinner tonight, dear? No venom, no condescension, just a question, fragile as glass. Simone's thumb hovered over the reply, her heart a tangle of pity and defiance. They tried to cage me, she thought, her grandmother's voice echoing, You don't shout, child. You move. She typed, her fingers steady. I'll check my schedule, Eleanor. The sky's busy tonight. She hit send, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The city glittered below, a battlefield she'd conquered, but the war within, between forgiveness and freedom, still raged. Ethan's footsteps broke her reverie, soft but sure, his presence a warmth at her side. You okay? He asked, his voice low, carrying the weight of their rebuilt trust. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the man who'd stepped out of his father's shadow. Caldwell Nix thrived under his leadership, his decision sharp, his vision shaped by Simone's blueprint. Her eyes met his, searching the hazel depths for the guilt that once clouded them. It was gone, replaced by a quiet strength. I'm fine, she said, her voice soft but steady, a tide smoothing jagged edges. Just thinking. He leaned against the railing, his shoulder brushing hers. About them? His voice was gentle, but his jaw tightened, a flicker of old wounds, his parents' scorn, his own blindness. Mother's been calling me, too. She's different now, softer. Simone's chest tightened, a pang of something she couldn't name, pity perhaps, or the ghost of resentment. They're lost, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Their world collapsed, and they're grasping at shadows. She thought of Richard, a broken king in his empty office, and Eleanor, her pearls scattered like fallen stars. They'd tried to cage her, to make her small, but now they were the ones trapped in their own ruins. Ethan's hand found hers, his fingers warm, intertwining with hers like a vow. You gave them a chance, he said, his voice steady, proud. You gave me a chance, not many would. Her heart thudded, a wildfire of love and lingering pain. She squeezed his hand, her eyes tracing the city's skyline. I didn't do it for them, she said, her voice firm but laced with warmth. I did it for us, for something real. She thought of her mother's market stall, the vibrant chaos of Lagos, the lessons of resilience woven into every deal. That was her true legacy, not the Caldwell name. Ethan's lips curved, a rare, unguarded smile. You've built more than I ever could, he said, his voice thick with admiration. Caldwell Nix. It's changing lives. Clean energy, schools, and clinics. You're not just a name anymore, Simone. You're a force." Her breath caught, a spark of pride igniting in her chest. She'd named the Clean Tech Fund after her mother, a woman who'd taught her to see value in the overlooked. Now that fund powers communities, lights classrooms, and fuels futures. But the weight of it, the lives, the expectations, pressed against her ribs. "It's not enough," she said, her voice soft, almost to herself. "There's always more to do." Ethan's hand tightened on hers, his eyes searching hers. "Then we'll do it together," he said, his voice a promise, not a plea. "No shadows, no secrets. Just us." Her heart swelled, a tide of hope breaking through the ash of her past. She leaned into him, her cheek brushing his shoulder, his scent, cedar and resolve, grounding her. For a moment, the city's roar faded, leaving only the rhythm of their breaths. Synchronized, steady. They weren't just husband and wife anymore. They were partners, equals, forging a path through the wreckage of the old world. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her network. Lego Summit confirmed. Keynote ready? Her lips parted, a breath of possibility. She'd been invited to speak, to share her vision, to stand where her mother once stood. The thought sent a shiver through her, a spark of something fierce and free. She looked up at Ethan, her smile sharp, alive. "I'm speaking in Lagos next week," she said, her voice steady, a declaration. "Will you come?" His eyes widened, then softened, a grin breaking through. "Wouldn't miss it," he said, his voice warm, certain. "I want to see you light up the world." She laughed, a sound bright and fierce cutting through the night. The city sprawled below, a canvas of her making, but her eyes lifted to the horizon where a private jet waited, its silhouette a promise of flight. She'd broken their cage, rebuilt their empire, and now the sky was hers to claim. "Busy night?" Ethan asked, his voice teasing, but his eyes held hers, steady, unyielding. She smiled, her gaze fixed on the jet, its lights a beacon in the dark. "The busiest," she said, her voice a vow, a spark in the open sky. The world was waiting, and she was ready to soar. Simone, the silent wife dismissed as a shadow, rises as Nyx, a financial titan, seizing control of the Caldwell empire and rewriting its legacy with resilience and vision. From boardroom battles to personal redemption, her journey unveils a storm of ambition and truth, proving true power lies in impact, not approval. Thank you for joining this tale of defiance and triumph. Please like, subscribe, and share for more stories of unshakable spirits. Stay tuned for the next chapter. New horizons await. Your support fuels these journeys, so hit that button now